friends, welcome to My Sew Bliss. Today I'm super excited to be partnering up with Baby Lock sewing machines and bringing you another sewing tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this fabulous robe. This is a pattern from Helen's closet. It's the Arbutus robe. She has wonderful patterns. I love them. This robe is fabulous. I haven't wanted to take it off since I made it. It is so cozy. So I can't wait to show you how to make it and walk you step by step through the process. I'm going to be using my Baby Lock Accolade, which is this serger right here. This serger is incredible. It can do so many things, has so many different stitches and works incredibly well. It has air threading, which I absolutely love. I'll put a link down below for it so you guys can check it out. I'll be using that as well as my Baby Lock Zest, which is this sewing machine right here. I'll also put a link down below for that as well, along with the pattern and where I got this fun fabric from. I'm not sure if they still have it. This is a waffle fabric. It's not stretchy, it's just like a cotton waffle, and I love it. I'm sure if you Google it, you can find it, but I will put a link for this shop that I got it from down below. They might have it and they might have other colors as well. So let's get started making your robe. Now, before we get started sewing the main part of this robe, we have to do a few little detail pieces that are going to make this robe what it is, make it look nice and professional and not just like some homemade project. So one of the first things that you want to do is do stay stitching. Stay stitching is going to be on the necklines. It's going to help so those necklines don't stretch before you sew them. I cut this fabric out probably 2 months ago, trying to get ready for this video. And obviously I still took a lot of time, but if I would have just left that fabric, I've been carrying it around, and if I wouldn't have stay stitched it before, it could have stretched a little bit and then the neckline gets wonky. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal for a robe, but if you were doing like a shirt or a nice top or a dress or something like that, it would definitely be noticeable. So you just want to make sure it's right inside your seam allowance. You do a regular stitch and you want to go from the middle or the top of the body down and not pull it out this way, if that makes sense. So stay stitching is the first thing you want to do. Next is interfacing. There are multiple pieces that need to be interfaced, and depending on the thickness of your fabric, you will want to do this. Mine's a medium thickness, but I want it to be a sturdy, nice robe that holds up for a long time, so I am interfacing it. I am going to treat it like it's, I don't know, like regular fabric, I guess, not a heavy duty fabric. So I interfaced all the pieces. There's like a little tie that hangs on it, the sleeve cuffs, the pockets, that kind of thing, which leads me to third thing, preparing the pockets. So I prepared with a regular sewing machine. I prepared the pockets, and I'm going to use a regular sewing machine and my serger together. So that's going to be we're going to be going back and forth between the two. You don't necessarily have to do that. You could just use your sewing machine. You could probably use your serger on most things, but I like to do a little mix of both. So I finished this raw edge and ironed the edges as well, got them ready to be sewn on. But I decided I'm going to wait to sew them on until I have the robe like actually put together, so I can kind of see it on my body, and then place the pockets where I actually want them. And I'm doing the same exact thing with the hem, because it does suggest to iron the hem and finish off the hem, but I think I'm going to leave that till the end and just see it on my body and how I like it. If I want to do it shorter, great. If I want a smaller hem, great. So now that I have all of that done, I am ready to get the bulk of this sewing done and get an actual robe going. So I'm going to get my front and my back pieces and place them right sides together. Make sure you have a left side and a right side to your front pieces. So it just depends on if you look at your pieces. Can you tell which one's the left and the right side? Usually it's based on the sides of the notches, what notches are where, and then the type of fabric you have. Mine doesn't really have a front and a back side, so I could essentially, I'm just going to do that, and that's how it goes. So I'm going to grab my back and I'm going to pin the shoulder seams together. So that's what we're doing very first thing. So like I said earlier, I'm going to be using both my sewing machine and my serger, so that way I can get a really good, nice looking project. You can use either one, you could use both, but I'm going to walk you through how I'm using both. So first I'm going to be sewing my shoulder seams, and our seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch. So I'm going to sew that down first, and then I'll take it over to the serger. Now I'm over at my Accolade or my serger, and I'm just using a regular serger stitch, but what I want to do is I want to finish off my raw edges. I have some thicker fabric, so if I just sew them together, it's going to make those seams really bulky. So I'm going to individually serge the edge of this and this other one as well on both of my shoulder seams. So that's 4 seams that I'm going to be serging just to finish off this raw edge. And like I said, I want to make this professional looking and looking really nice. Another thing that's going to help your projects and making them look more professional is making sure you have matching thread. Do I do this with every project? Heck no. Most projects I don't. I like a quick project and I don't have to wait around for thread to get here. But this one, I feel like on robes you see the seams more, obviously because it's open. So that's why I'm choosing to do it this way. And it's just nice to have something look more a little luxurious and nice looking. So I'm going to sew these raw edges just to make them extra nice. Okay, once you have those shoulder seams sewn, we then have to do a little more prep work on the inner ties, the belt loops, and the hanging loop. You might be eliminating one of those, like the hanging loop, but chances are you'll probably be doing one of those. Now, I decided last minute, because obviously I already cut it out, but last minute I decided I have this fun twill tape that's just like a measuring twill tape on one side. I got it off a shop on Etsy. It was kind of random. I don't even know how I found it, to be honest. So I think I want to use this for the belt loop, whatever I just said. The belt loop, the internal ties, and the hanging tie. I also have it in black. I might need to use some of it in black. So maybe like the internal ties will be black. The belt loops, I keep going back and forth on the belt loops, because the belt loops are, or the belt is actually going to be this fabric. So all that to say, while I decide, I don't have to do what the next step is, but if you look at the pattern, the next step is going to be getting your all those pieces ready. So you're making sure those raw edges are on the inside. And this is a lot better if you have a thinner fabric. If you have a thicker fabric, you could use a different fabric, use twill tape like I am showing, and that's what gave me the idea to use this, or else I'm not good at thinking about these things myself. Use another fabric, use the twill tape, or finish off the raw edges and then use it. So those are a few options you can use if you have a thicker fabric. If you don't have a thick fabric and you can turn it right sides out, you don't have to worry about this at all. So that's part of the reason I'm not doing that. But if you are, look at the instructions. This pattern has amazing instructions and shows you exactly how to do these the best way. And it even gives you tips. That's how I decided twill tape was going to be my best option. So after that, after that, I'm going to get all my twill tape ready. And then we need our front facing pieces. I feel like this is all over the place at first because you have to get a lot of stuff ready and then it all comes together. So hang in there. Now with your two front facing pieces, if you have a thinner, lighter fabric, you're going to fold this long edge. So the one without a notch in it, you're going to fold that down 3/8 of an inch. I am actually going to cut that off and then we're going to finish it later with the serger. So I'm going to measure along this edge 3/8 of an inch and just trim that on both pieces only because I have a thicker fabric. I'm going to say that over and over again so you guys know that's why I'm doing it. Next, I'm going to take the facing piece that's going to go on the left side. It'll look just like this. Hold on, like this. And then I'm taking one of my internal ties, putting them right sides together, matching that up with the notch that's right there on that diagonal. And I'm going to baste this in place so it doesn't go anywhere while we're getting everything else ready and prepared for it. So I'm just doing a simple stitch along this tie. After you have that sewn, we can set that one to the side. Again, lots of prep. And we're going to take our collar pieces. You should have 4 of these. 2 of them should be interfaced and 2 of them should be not interfaced. I did not read that and interfaced all of them. So I guess I'm just going to have a really strong collar or a really stiff collar. I don't know. Maybe it'll suck up more water. I need to read better, but we're just going to place them right sides together on this short end and sew those together. I am going to use just my sewing machine on this one because these will be inside. You won't see these edges. I'm going to do my interfaced ones and the non-interfaced ones that I'm supposed to have that you hopefully have. I'm going to do those as well. And then I just have to pick which ones want to be my interfaced ones and which ones want to be my non-interfaced ones. So I'm going to sew those, iron them open so they look really nice and are ready to go to the next step. Next, you're going to take one of the collars, the one that is not interfaced. So I'm going to set the interfaced one off to the side. This is my non-interfaced one. Right sides are facing up. And I'm going to take my facing pieces and pin them to the ends. So you see how it has this end? There's a curved shape, a line right here. Well, we're going to take them right sides together. This one is just going to have your tie on the end, and that line on the end of the facing is just going to line up right along the line of our collar piece. And I'm going to pin that in place. So I have, this is the left side, and then this side is the right side. And you'll know which one's which because when you put them right sides together, they'll fit perfectly and even line up in this little corner spot right here. So I'm just going to pin those so they're ready to be sewn. With those 2 edges pinned, we're just going to sew right down that straight edge of the facing, and we're sewing at 1/2 of an inch. So make sure you're not doing that 5/8 of an inch. Now we have this collar facing piece, and this is next step is going to be if you have the thicker fabric like we've been handling it. I'm going to be cutting off, so right here where we sewed it, then I'm coming along here and I'm going to cut off 3/8 of an inch on just the collar piece all the way to the other side where the other facing starts or got sewn on, so which would be right here. So just cutting off 3/8 of an inch. If you're not using a thicker fabric, you're going to fold that under, I believe it's a 1/2 inch. But I'm going to cut it first, and then we're actually going to serge or finish off this edge. So if you have a thicker fabric, if you have a serger, perfect. I'm going to show you exactly what to do. If you don't have a serger, you could use like a zigzag stitch to finish off this edge, just so it doesn't unravel on you and looks really nice. So I'm going to start at one end of my facing. Make sure you're doing the right side of it. Also make sure your internal tie doesn't get in the serger and cut off. That would make me so sad. So I'm going to make sure I don't do that. Okay, I have that long piece just serged. Beautiful. We have a tie. So this is the interfacing and collar, or facing and collar. It does not have interfacing on the collar. That is my top collar. We're going to set that to the side. This one is the under collar. It is interfaced and it does not have any of the facings on it. We are going to take this piece now and pin it right sides together to the robe. And we're going to find the side that has the notches, and that's the side we're matching up with the robe, so we match up those notches. Let me grab the rope. Okay, this is a lot of fabric to show you guys, but I guess if I just do the top, and it's kind of confusing because you don't know what the right side and the wrong side is, but I'm going to try and do my best. So here I have that under collar with my interfacing. I even put a little U on it so I would remember under collar. And there's a notch right here on the front piece of the robe, on that front neck edge. And there should be, oh, right here, there's another notch on the under collar. So I'm matching those two notches up. Pieces are right sides together. I'm going to pin the notch first. Then I'm going to go over to the other side. So it'll go around the back. And there's another notch. It's going to match up with the notch on the front of the robe. Let's see. And you should have multiple notches. So I might need to go back and check a few of my notches, make sure I didn't get rid of any. So I tend to do that. So it's always good to make sure, double check your notches. But I'll pin the rest of this in place, and then I'm going to check my notches, make sure they're accurate, because this should lay nicely along that neck edge. Yeah, so I have a notch right here on the under collar. So you should have 4 notches and this middle piece. The notch closest to this seam, the center seam, is going to go on your shoulder seam. So I'm going to lay that flat and open. If you need to iron that, you definitely can. And I'm just lining that notch up with it, pinning it in place. And then this seam should go along the center back, which I don't have a notch at. I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I can always fold that piece in half and find it. Just to be safe, you know, we always like a symmetrical robe. We don't want to be out of balance, right, on our collar. That's why we have all these notches. Okay, so I pinned that, and then I missed my notch on this side for that shoulder seam. But now I see it. It was stuck in that interfacing, which is why I always miss them. Okay, and then I'll go down this side and pin the rest of the collar on as well on this side. There we go. All pinned in place. Now, before we sew that down, you want to make sure to add in your hanging loop, which is just in the center back of your robe. So like I said, I'm using this cute little twill, and I'm going to flip this around for you guys to see better. So here I have my center back marked with this pin because I have that seam also back there. And I'm going to pin this in place as well, just because it never hurts to have more pins. And we're going to do like a little U shape here, hopefully equally. And just right in that middle spot, I'll have a perfect little tab to hold. I wonder if I should flip it over. It doesn't matter. When it's hanging, you aren't going to see it. So I'm going to do it like that. And now I'm going to stitch everything I just pinned. So from the end of this underside collar, from one end to the other, onto the robe at 5/8 of an inch. We keep going back and forth. So make sure you're using the right seam allowance on this. After you have this underside collar sewn in, now we're going to trim it to eliminate some of the bulk. You can also clip your seams. So one of these I'm going to trim, one of the seams I'm going to trim to a shorter length than the other one. So that way there's not two laying on top of each other directly. They're kind of offset, like I said, eliminating that bulk. I'm going to trim the one with the interfacing, so that would be the collar. I'm going to trim the collar so that it gets rid of the bulk. How many times can I say the same thing over and over again? So I'm just going to trim along that, and then we can go to our next step. With that trimmed, I'm going to take it over to the ironing board and press that seam up towards the under collar. This is really important because after this, we're going to put on the other side of the collar and trap those seams in there and make it look really nice. So ironing it is going to help that process go a lot smoother. One thing you want to make sure though is your little hanging tab is still hanging down. You don't want to push that up because we don't want it to go away. We want it to still be seen, but all this raw edgeness is going to be pushed up to our under collar. Okay, now it's time to attach the top side collar, is that what it was called, to the underside of the collar. So the facing also is going to be attached to the robe. Whew. So that big piece that we sewed those together, that we have the tie on, that is going to be sewn together. We're going right sides together, the raw edge that we haven't done anything to. This is the raw edge that I serged. If you have a lighter fabric, you may have folded it under. That is totally fine. Don't get that confused. I'm going to start by lining up the collar's seam that we did in that center back. I'm going to line that up first. Make sure those are laying flat so it helps with the bulk. And pin those in place. I don't think, let's see, are there any notches? I should know, but I don't think so. So I'm just going to go down, making sure it's equally laying flat, looking nice. Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. And once I get through the collar, I'm going to continue pinning that facing piece, which is the long piece attached to the top side collar. I'm pinning that. We're going to make sure our little tie, inside tie, is out of the way as well. So let's flip this around for you guys. Okay, so too much fabric going on here. Okay, there we go. I don't know how people do it with like designer dresses. There's that top side collar. Okay, and we reached that moment where the collar ends and I go into the facing. That should line up pretty well. And it does. Lines up really well. So I'm going to pin it. Make sure it stays together. Pin those seams open if I can. And then continue on down the side of the robe with the side of the facing. Looks like I need to trim some threads in here, but we'll get to that. And once you reach the bottom, your facing will not line up with the bottom of the robe. It's going to line up, if you pre-folded the hem, it will line up with that mark. I did not pre-fold the hem, but I think we'll be okay. Just gonna make sure this all works out. So see how that's a little bit of a difference. We got threads going on too, but I'm gonna leave it for now because I just want to make sure the length is right, and I think that's gonna be the best for me. But one thing that is nice when you sew this is you're gonna start sewing over here and go over and up, so that'll get tucked in there and look nice. I promise it works out. Okay, now I'm going to the other side and pinning that. It's a lot of pinning, but it helps. It helps a lot. This is one of those projects where pinning is important. It makes your collar, anything with a collar, pinning is going to help. Now you're ready to sew that facing and collar together. So like I said, I'm going to start down here on this edge and then pivot and go up and around the entire thing. That'll finish this corner off edge really nicely. So I'm just going to slide that under. Sew at 5/8 of an inch. And if you have this edge folded, you want to make sure it stays folded. I don't need to right now because mine doesn't need to be folded, but I am going to stay at 5/8 of an inch. When you get back around, you're going to do the exact same thing you did at the bottom. So I'm going to leave my needle down, pick up my presser foot, pivot, and stitch to the end of that facing. And back stitch, and then I'll pull it out. Hopefully now you have your collar, your front facing attached to the robe, and you're starting to see a little progress. That seam that we just sewed to attach the two collar pieces together and attach that to the robe, we're going to trim that seam right now, so that way we can get rid of some of the bulk. I feel like I keep saying this over and over this whole project, bulk and getting rid of bulk or making the bulk look better. But that's part of sewing with this thicker fabric. And honestly, this fabric, this waffle fabric, I feel like is not that thick. Could be worse. So I'm gonna trim like I did earlier, trim one layer shorter, probably the one that has the interfacing, and then on the curves you can clip those curves so it'll lay nicer. That collar will lay nice. That's gonna help your collar look so much better. On this collar piece, you'll see that it's rounded, especially right here. So one thing to help with that is to clip to your seam allowance. Don't cut through that stitching, but just every so often you want to clip it, and that's just going to help that fabric spread and look nice. So if we take this, it's essentially giving it space to curve and lay nicely. And honestly, like once that is ironed, it's going to look even better. But especially if you have a thinner fabric, you can totally tell if something has been clipped or not. So keep that in mind. Just don't cut through that stitching. So I'm going to just clip along my curves, make sure enough of the bulk is out. When you are done trimming, you can flip the collar so that it's right sides out, wrong sides together. So it'll look like this. If we just squeeze it together, it looks really good. If you open it up, you can still see the inside. I need to grade mine just a little bit more. I didn't finish the part where the facing and the collar attached to the robe, we want to grade that as much as possible. We want to trim it as much as possible. So I'm going to do a little more trimming on that. And then I also didn't trim my corners. So I'm going to go ahead on the bottom edge of the robe. I'm going to trim that as well. Just make sure wherever you're trimming, you don't actually cut our seam. After you have all that trimming done, the next step is going to be taking it to the iron and ironing it so nicely so that it lays nicely. One thing I'm going to do before I do that, and this is only because I didn't do it at first, but now that I have somewhat of a robe, I can try it on and see if I like the length of it. So if I do, when I do, I'm going to I'm going to serge my edge first because I have a thicker fabric. I'm just going to do a serge right along this raw edge. This shorter part at the front, I'm going to leave that. That is just to reduce the bulk for when we turn it. And this is going to go like this. So that part right there is actually going to get tucked in this corner. So you won't see it on either side. It's going to get sewn in. But this right here, I want to make sure this has that serged edge so that we don't have any unraveling. If you have a thinner fabric, it can be double fold as well. That's what they suggest. So I'm going to do that to both my front pieces and my back pieces. Just since I'm doing my front, I'll do the back as well. But then we will be able to finish off that front facing really nicely and make sure it's ironed really well when I get to that step too. So serge first, then iron is what we're doing. I wanted to give you a look at the robe on the ironing board. So this is the facing, turned it so the right sides are out on the facing and then it's turned to the inside. Here is where it attaches to the collar. So I'm ironing that down really nicely, flipped out, and then this seam, I'm going to make sure it kind of rolls to the inside. So that's going to help it lay really nice for us. And then this seam right here, I have a seam here. You might have it folded under, but I'm going to iron that really nicely as well. And it's going to cover the seam that we sewed. We'll get to that next. After you've got it ironed really nicely, you can go ahead and pin that facing down and that collar down. Here you can see where I did my serging along that edge. You might have it folded there, but you just want to make sure it's pinned in place. It's going to cover our stitching that we did to attach the collar and just lay really, really nice so that we can do what's called edge stitching. And this is pretty much what it is. It's right on the edge of this seam right here. We're going to stitch to secure this in place and make it look really nice. It is going to be seen on the right side, so make sure you have thread that you like to look at on the outside. Here you can see where I have my little hanging tab. So it's just going to come right over the top of it and sit just like this. And I'm going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from this serged edge on the inside and secure that down. And that's going to lock in all those raw edges. So you won't have to worry about those anymore. It's going to look so nice. Make sure on your shoulder seams, if you ironed them open, that they're laying nice and flat like that, because they are going to get stitched down right along here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this over to the sewing machine and get ready to start that edge stitch. For the sewing machine, I'm just going to start at the end of one of the hems. I'm just starting at the very bottom of it. I'm not going to mess with the hem right here. Mine's a little big. I'm not sure why it's so big, but I'm just going to leave it like that because it fits perfectly. So I'm just starting right along that edge and sewing at 1/8 of an inch away from that. I'm going to go nice and slow, make sure it's a good looking seam.
And then once you get back around to the other side, I'm just going to finish it off with a little back stitch and then trim my threads. All right, now I have that edge stitching done. I'm going to do a top.
Now that you have your collar finished, we're gonna stop the video here just in case you just wanted help with the collar, which is totally fine. If you want to follow along with the rest of the tutorial, I'll put a link in the bio. I'll put a link on the screen for that second tutorial, just so it's not like crazy long, because this video is already so long. But that way we just break it up a little bit. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful. Tried to give you good step-by-step visuals of how to attach that collar. Make sure you check out the links below, especially for the Baby Lock Accolade and Baby Lock Zest. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.